Hello and welcome to the Journal. I'm Steve Kendall. The 2020 general election is just a few weeks away, and we thought it would be a good idea to discuss the different methods you can use to vote and clear up some of the myths about how voting in Ohio in our system works. Now, our guests are the co-directors of the Wood County Board of Elections, Terry Burton and Carol Dejong. I want to welcome you both to the Journal. Carol, let's talk about the first thing people need to know, which of course is, if I haven't registered to vote, what do I need to do that, and what's the deadline for that right now?
Sure. So the deadline for registration is October 5th, and it is until 9 p.m. So if you're local, you can go ahead and come into our office up until 9 p.m. Otherwise, you want to make sure if you're mailing it, it gets a postmark that is October 5th. You can also register at lots of sites around your community, your libraries that are open, and BMVs, they all take registrations for elections.
Now, if I go through that process, what are some of the things that am I eligible to register as a voter in Ohio? There are some criteria for that, correct?
You need to be a U.S. citizen, you need to be 18 by election day.
Okay, all right.
And of course you need to be in the county, have a residence in the county.
In which you're registering, okay. If I want to make sure I'm registered to vote, what's the mechanism for that? Just in case I'm thinking, you know, maybe I haven't voted since the last presidential election, or I haven't voted for a number of years. How do they go about checking that?
So your best option really is to go to voteohio.gov, and you can look it up there. You can do it at our website as well. Just use your browser for Wood County Board of Elections, but voteohio.gov is a great place to go. And always, if you're having trouble, go ahead and call your Board of Elections and they can confirm that information.
Yeah. Now, Terry, are you guys seeing at Wood County, and again, one thing I want to stress too is the rules in the state of Ohio are the same from county to county, correct? There's no difference between doing this in Wood County and voting in Putnam County, correct?
Yeah, the nice thing they've done is they've made registration uniformed across the state. All the deadlines are the same across the state. Early voting schedules across the state are the same. So a lot of the things that we're going to talk about today are just standard across the state of Ohio.
Yeah. Now, are you seeing more people registering, or is it a typical year for people coming in to register or sending in their registrations?
It's really changed a lot over the years. It used to be during presidential elections you would see a huge bump in voter registration. Now with people being able to update their voter registration when they get their driver's license renewed, a lot of that's kind of leveled out, and so we've seen a little bump, but generally people have taken care of that sometime through the process, either because they've been interested in a local election or because they've just re-upped at the BMV when they got their license done.
Okay, well that's probably good news, because you don't want to have any more activity than you really need to have right before this election. So if people can register in a much easier fashion, that makes it a lot simpler for everybody all through the system.
Yeah, certainly our office gets really busy before a presidential, and with the absentees coming in, having that part taken off our plate, and just making sure that the rolls are clean and that you have all your information well in advance has been a good thing for us. And because people have gotten to it early, we've been able to clean up a lot of things that normally they might not do until the last deadline.
Yeah. Now, you mentioned, of course, the voter rolls, which are the people that are registered to vote. And I guess, Carol, I know, how do you go through, because I know there's some, I guess maybe, I don't want to say a lack of understanding, but when you go back through those rolls, when do you take a voter out of the registered voter roll? There is a process for that, obviously, and people seem to be concerned about being taken off inadvertently, but kind of talk a little bit about the process of having someone removed from the registration rolls.
There is a maintenance process that we have. No one is going to be removed this year for a presidential election. Okay. So there's no concern about that. Okay. It does often, you have to have a lot of criteria. So there's a lot of details that we look into to make sure, that it is something that is necessary. We reach out several times. And now with as Terry had mentioned, the registration at the Bureau of Motor Vehicles, just by getting your address updated or renewing your driver's license, that does keep you active on your election roll as well. And I do want to mention, I think I didn't say earlier, you can register online and update your address online. Again, that voteohio.gov is a good source.
Yeah. Now, once we're registered to vote, so I'm registered, I'm good to go. Let's talk a little bit about the ways I can now vote. I mean, we've heard about mail-in ballots, we've heard about early voting, those sort of things. So, Terry, maybe talk about some of the ways that we can vote other than showing up on election day at 6:30 a.m. until the polls close. So, if I want to do a mail-in ballot, what's the process for that now?
Mail-in ballots, all the registered voters in the state just received from the Secretary of State's office an application in the mail. Many voters have received multiple from different organizations and political groups, multiple absentee applications. They only need to fill out one. Generally, from what we understand, we've not seen one that isn't correct as far as the layout, so you can feel comfortable that any of those that you can still find in your mail pile are good to send into our office. But basically, a voter needs to send us an application that has, their name, their address, their birth date, their ID information, their signature, and then we will put them into our system. But then voters need to understand that those ballots can't be mailed until October 6th. So we have, probably around 13,000, a little over 13,000 voters here in Wood County that have already sent in those applications that are in the list to get mailed those ballots, but they just need to be patient because we need to wait until October 6th to get those mailed out. We're still accepting applications, and we will accept applications clear up through that Saturday before election.
Okay. Now, the obvious question, I guess, and maybe I'll put that out there, I'm getting multiple application forms, and I have my one from the Secretary of State with me. I was looking at it just this morning. So I send this in. If I get another one from another organization and mail that one into, what happens? You guys catch that in the process, I'm sure, correct?
Yeah, you have one voter registration record, and so we associate that back to your record. So we have what we call duplicate applications, and those are common. And as these groups continue to send them out, people then doubt that they got the process right, which isn't necessary for them to doubt it as much as they, just feel like, well, I'll send it in just to make sure. Right. In some ways, that kind of slows us down. Once you have that in, we appreciate that you want to make sure, but you can go on to our website or go to ohiovote.gov and look at the absentee, and on the website it'll show you whether you are in the queue to be issued a ballot.
Yeah. So there really is no, and because I know one of the questions that you hear on the street in the various places is that you send in multiple requests for a ballot, you're going to get multiple ballots back, which then in some people's minds they believe would allow them to then file multiple ballots and vote more than once. And you're saying that can't happen. You'll get one ballot back and that will be your official ballot.
Yeah, when we, once again, associate it with your voter record, any additional applications will be considered duplicate. We just put them in a separate file. No action is taken on them. In rare cases, when we're in an election cycle and a voter, a ballot gets lost in the mail, once again, we can deactivate a ballot and then issue a new one. But there's no way, even in that scenario, even if they both end up showing up in the mail, that two can be counted into the same voter, because those are very carefully, we're very careful about that process of issuing ballots, knowing it's one ballot per voter.
Yeah. And I think that's good for people to know, because I say there's just so much uproar about this particular election cycle. We need to take a break. We'll be back in just a moment with Terry Burton and Carol Dejong, co-directors of the Wood County Board of Elections, as we talk about voting in the year 2020. We'll be back in a moment. Thank you for staying with us here on The Journal. Our guests are Terry Burton and Carol Dejong, co-directors of the Wood County Board of Elections. And we're talking about voting in 2020 for the general election coming up in November. And once again, want to emphasize that in the state of Ohio, the rules are the same no matter what county you vote in. So as we talk about how to vote and things of that nature, the same rules apply in every county. It's not different in Wood County compared to Lucas County, compared to Mercer County, et cetera. So we'll keep that in mind as we go along. Now, Carol, we've talked a little bit about mailing in an application for a ballot and mail-in ballots a little bit. What are some of the other ways, if I want to vote early, that I can take advantage of in the Ohio system?
So our early in-person voting, that begins also the same day as our ballots get mailed, October 6th.
Okay.
And we're open from 8 to 5. And again, these are statewide hours, so it's 8 to 5 the first 2 weeks, Monday through Friday. Then we'll be open 8 to 6 that third week, and 8 to 7 the fourth week. And we are open the 2 weekends prior to Election Day. So, and those hours are Saturday from 8 to 4 and Sunday from 1 to 5. And again, those are consistent statewide. Every county has an early vote center, but they only are allowed one by law. So in most cases, those are at the Board of Elections, and that's the case here in Wood County. That information is available, of course, at websites. And
Now, let me ask a question here. So I go in and cast my ballot at the early voting center. When does that get counted?
That's a great question,
Okay.
and a lot of people wonder about that. Those are actually the first results that we report. The counting happens just as in the days prior, but we don't tabulate anything. And so our mailed that are in our office on Election Day, those are all run through our tabulators, and when 7:30 hits and we're able to then get some totals and report those represent our early in-person as well as all the absentee mail that we have in the office.
Okay. And once I file my early ballot, and you've talked about that, how are those secured until they are actually then put into the counting process? Just so people understand, those ballots are locked down completely, correct? They're not just sitting in a box someplace at the Board of Elections, right?
Absolutely. They are behind locked doors. Once we receive them, we do have to log them in. We have to check them and log them in. There's a verification process that we've received it from the voter. And then once that is completed, we keep them, of course, under lock and key. Mm-hmm.
Now, you mentioned, we've talked a little bit about absentee ballots, and both of you can jump in here. An absentee ballot, okay, to be eligible to be counted, when does that have to be in? And either one of you can jump in and answer this. So if I go absentee,
sure.
What's the deadline for that?
So if you're mailing your ballot, or if you're putting it in the U.S. postal system, it needs to have a postmark by the day before Election Day. So that would be November 2nd. It needs to be postmarked. If you're putting it in our drop box, you have until 7:30 election night. And as we mentioned, drop boxes, there's one per county.
Right.
And if you work in one county and live in another, you want to make sure, particularly if it's election day, that drop box you're using is for the county where you live. It isn't just perhaps the one that's most convenient, at the lunch hour.
Okay. Yeah. So in my case, I live in Lucas County, I work in Wood County, but what I need to do is take my Lucas County, I need to go to my Lucas County drop box and use that one, not just say, oh, I'm going by the Board of Elections in Bowling Green, I'll just drop it off in the Wood County box. You need to go to the county in which you reside.
Particularly if that goal is, of course, to take some of the burden off the postal system.
Right. Okay. And with these ballots, again, when do these get counted? These are tabulated before, but not actually put into the actual system. The numbers are there, but they're not entered into the vote count at that point. And I'm probably not saying that correctly, but because I think people are confused. They think that their absentee ballots aren't counted until after Election Day, so what is the process for counting those again? So how does that work so that people are clear that when they have an absentee ballot, how it gets tabulated?
Sure. So it is, the law does allow for us to run the paper ballots ahead of time through our scanners that do the tabulation process. However, we do not run any reports. We don't make, we have no idea what any kind of results is at all.
Okay.
And those machines here in Wood County, we vote on an ICX machine, and the sticks and the information, the memory, all the votes that are on those are not even uploaded until after 7:30 on election night. But it is a very quick process. So generally by 7:45 in the past has been our goal. We get those results, first results uploaded. So there are ballots that will come in the mail after. Those will become part of the official tabulation, not the election night unofficial.
Right. Yeah, and that's a good point. And Terry, could you talk about the difference between the numbers we see on election night, which are the things that have been tabulated in essence real time, and the fact that those are the numbers we have on election night, and then there's a certification process that takes place, so that sometimes things change between election night and that certification. So talk a little about how that process works and why that's part of the process.
Yeah, the unofficial versus official has always been a little bit of a confusion point for people. And in this year, I think that's only been magnified. Certainly we all have heard about, it's going to take weeks for us to know final results. And there's a lot of, well, I think in some ways unfortunate scare tactics that we may not know what, what the government is, for a period of time. But this is a very normal process. On election night, as Carol has said, we have all those absentees and at the polls ballots, and those are all totaled. But for that 10 days after, the provisional ballots that were cast, those are people that have changed their address or didn't get themselves registered in the right county. They were registered in the state, but not the exact county. We go through a process where we verify that those people were registered in the state and meet all the other qualifications to vote where they did. And then in addition to that, then we have the absentee ballots that come in, and those are also that were mailed before Election Day,
right?
But they have that period to come in. And so we always have those outstanding provisionals and outstanding absentees sitting out there. We have 21 days to do our official, and those are added in at that point. So unless the race is particularly close, typically, that has no effect on it, which is why people don't typically spend time with that.
Right.
And even then, historically, those close races tend to mimic, the extra ballots tend to mimic the percentages that have been voted in so far.
Okay. Well, when we come back, let's talk a little bit about how the recount process works, because that's always something, it doesn't happen a lot, but it does seem to happen occasionally. We can kind of explain that to people so they understand what triggers that and the percentages and that sort of thing. Back in just a moment here on The Journal on WBGU-PBS. You're with us here on The Journal on WBGU-PBS, and our guests are Carol Dejong and Terry Burton, the co-directors of the Wood County Board of Elections. And we're talking about voting in the year 2020, some of the things that, that are out there that we've tried to kind of take care of some of those myths and misconceptions about what's going on. And one of the things that we're leaving this last segment, let's talk a little bit about the recount process, because we talked about the vote count on election night and then the certification. And sometimes between those two things, one of the things that can happen is the closeness of the vote can trigger a recount. So whichever one of you want to jump in and talk about how that recount process works so that people are clear on that, because it's one more thing on election night that could, muddy the waters a little bit. So
yeah, and the recount process won't be decided on election night. The recount process isn't decided until the official.
Gotcha.
So once again, races that are close, once we get all the eligible votes in, which is those absentees and those provisionals, then it's determined whether it's closer than 0.5% and that's on a county-wide race. It's actually 0.25% for a statewide race. The Secretary of State will order any statewide recounts based on the totals from all the counties, and any county-wide recount is ordered by the Board of Elections. And so we go through a process that as we're reconciling and getting all those votes in, then we decided our official whether it qualifies for an automatic recount.
Okay. And when that automatic recount starts, what's the time frame for that to be finalized?
Well, it starts within 5 to 7 days of the
Okay.
official board meeting certifying it, which, as I said, is like 21 days after the election.
Right.
So you're looking at more early December. There's not a specific drop dead date. Most boards of elections like to get those out of the way as quickly as possible.
Sure.
And once again, the candidates, the parties can have witnesses to that process. It really varies. We've done recounts where, no one's around, and we've done recounts where, presidential candidates have sent representatives, and there've been a lot of people in the room. The bottom line is, if your election's going well, which typically, luckily, here in Wood County, that's the case, it doesn't change any. Once you get to the official count, there's no more ballots to be added in, so recounts are pretty much formalities. Between the unofficial and the official, it changes because there's still outstanding ballots.
Right.
So the thing to look at with recounts is there's no more ballots being added in, and so at that point, it's just a matter of verifying the counting.
Yeah, now when you go back through, and of course, things are done, when you vote in person, are done with computer. When you go back and literally do a recount, what does that physically involve in terms of handling the ballots that aren't computer ballots, that sort of thing? I mean, those are physically handled and counted, correct?
Yeah, the official process only deals with paper. It deals with the paper ballots that were mailed in, and it only deals with the receipt tapes that the computers print. We verify that the printed copy matches the electronic copy, but it's the printed copy that is actually counted. Unfortunately, like so many processes, it typically is the human counting that sometimes we have to go through a couple times to make sure is right.
Right.
But we compare that back then to the electronic counting, and once we've verified a sample size of 5%, then we can say that the entire election, and we can run it again through the electronic copy and verify that it's counting correctly.
Okay, good. Now, we've talked about going to the polls, and I guess the one thing we want to make clear to people is, and Carol, you can jump in here, is that going to the polls, if you're going to vote in person, as you may have done for years, isn't any different this year, correct?
That's correct. The polls are going to be open on November 3rd, and same hours, 6:30 to 7:30. Just, we do urge people, go ahead and do it early. You can come to early voting, or of course by mail. Both of those are all the same option. Now, those people who really want to go election day, we'll have lots of PPE and for our poll workers as well as our voters to make sure that everyone's safe. I don't think we're going to look any different than you've been experiencing at the grocery stores and the retail places where you've been. But we will have PPE in place to keep both voters and poll workers safe.
And you mentioned that too, and if I understand correctly, masks are not required to be eligible to vote, correct?
That is true.
But you would encourage people to wear a mask when they go to the polls.
Absolutely want to encourage people to wear a mask. It is respectful to all of the whole population, the other voters as well as the poll workers who are there. It is a public place, and when you're outdoors or even indoors, we're asking for keeping that 6 foot, keep your social distance in place, and hope the way we expect, I think things will run smoothly, and we do encourage that we will have signs posted. And if you forgot your mask, we will have masks available.
Okay.
The nice thing is we also had an August special election that we were able to test out our processes. And that not only let us see how our poll workers worked in that environment, but more importantly, how cooperative the voters generally were. Generally we find that people, as Carol said, are used to being out in public and used to wearing the mask. It's only the common sense thing to do in this situation. And in only very rare cases do you run into a situation where a voter, just can't physically do it. And there's going to be some opportunities for us to vote them outside the polling place.
Okay, so yeah, and I guess you said you've had the experience of doing this in August, so you learn. Everybody learned some things from that, and that seemed to go smoothly for the most part. So, is there anything else that we haven't touched on, because we've got just a couple of minutes here, that you really want people to know, or things we want to go back over to make sure people are up to speed and comfortable and clear on what's going to happen in November?
Well, I do want to just reach out to the poll workers that we've had on our team for a long time, and grateful for those who feel comfortable being part of this process here in November. And we have also had quite a few people reach out through the state's website, which is great. We're just getting those appointments in place now. So you'll hear from us soon. We will be using extra people just to make sure that we can keep all the protocol that we want in place working well.
Okay, great. Well, Carol Dejong, Terry Burton, thank you so much for being here. Hopefully we've cleared up some things and put people's minds at ease about being able to vote this year in November in the year 2020 with so much going on. And we appreciate you taking the time to come in and help us with that this week. So thank you so much. And you can check us out at WBGU.org, and of course, you can watch us each week on WBGU-PBS. We will see you again next time here on The Journal.